Okay, hey guys, let's blast through Sweden. We're talking about the declining empires of Sweden and Poland. Do not forget hop and rap. Sweden's not part of technically Central Europe, so they're not part of that trio, but they are a declining empire. First things first, the Baltic Sea is where a lot of products are traded, and between Eastern Europe and Western Europe is many merchants will travel through the Baltic area, and the land surrounding it, all the port cities, are actually very valuable. In the 16th century, Sweden will break ties with Denmark, and they're going to be independent nations. Even though they are Protestant, both Protestant, and they fought in 30 Years' War together, they became constant rivals in the 17th century. So Sweden, that was once really poor economically. The monarchy was not very powerful because they had a lot of struggles with the nobility. They eventually did become a world power in the 17th century. Total population is less than 1 million. Okay, so I want you to go back to your Gustavus Adolphus notes, and this is, religious wars, 30 Years' War, Treaty of Westphalia. Please go back to your notes, and if you're thinking like, I left in my locker, well, call a friend, all right? I want you to think for yourself, Gustavus Adolphus, what is his significance? What happens to Sweden in the 30 Years' War? What do they get out of the Treaty of Westphalia? And when you're done reviewing that, you write a few things down, and we'll be back, okay? So Gustavus Adolphus, what's important about him? Well, King of Sweden, 30 Years' War. He, great general, eventually will die in battle at the Battle of Lutzen, and the Treaty of Westphalia will provide Sweden some of the coastal regions of Germany that is really important still in maintaining basically that Baltic coast and sea area. That was where they will kind of control for decades, and it's like a Swedish lake is what they call it, where they're able to shut out other nations from even stepping into their territory. So the Russians, the Poles, and the Germans have no reach in the area, and the monarchy in Sweden once was an elective system, but later will develop into a hereditary system, and Sweden became more westernized with experts from Western Europe, specifically the Netherlands, and with their innovative army and generals, they became more powerful through Gustavus and Charles XII. When Gustavus Adolphus dies, his daughter takes the throne. Her name is Christina, and she was not really the greatest leader because she was more interested in philosophy and religion than government. So
Christine Chain or Christine Edwards.
Yes, and so as she's interested in philosophy, she even invited Descartes to her court, and she began to have a lot of conflict with the Riksdag Parliament, the legislative assembly at that time, and eventually she will abdicate the throne, and her cousin Charles X will come to take over because she converted to Catholicism. Okay, big no-no. Country just went to war over religion. You chose the opposing side, and so she's influenced by the Catholic Reformation, interested in a lot of like Baroque art, and she even saw that she wanted Stockholm to be, kind of a place of the Renaissance, of kind of like in the north. Okay, Charles the 11th will come after Charles the 10th, and he will expand the monarchy to a more absolutist type. He will subdue the parliament and the church and improve the military. Very textbook, absolute ruler. Then Charles the 12th is Charles the 11th's son. Okay, so he was very interested in the military. He was a brilliant general, and he engaged Poland, Denmark, and Russia in war. And eventually, this will lead to Sweden's decline, because according to the Great Northern War, which we've learned about, right, Sweden will lose a lot of the Baltic land and control, and so they are no longer a first-class power. Here are some pictures of Queen Christina, and here is one of her with Descartes. Let's see on the right-hand side. Okay, Poland. It's called a republic. It's called the Republic of Poland because its king was elected, and the social classes took a lot of pride in their liberties. Okay, specifically the nobility, and the republic was going to last until 1795, and that's when it all fell apart, and then we had the Partition of Poland, and we'll get there. Okay, so the problems. Well, it's a huge amount of land, and so it was very inefficient in how it was governed, and the administration could not uphold, the system could not uphold maintaining the entire country. Also, you have the nobles, the landlords that had a lot of freedom and different liberties, and there was a lot of animosity towards the king trying to gain a greater central authority. The population was heterogeneous, and it was made up of two parts. Okay, so you have basically the main region is Poland in the west, but also you have the Grand Duchy of Lithuania in the east, and so they were united together by marriage and crowns. Okay, the union of crowns, and now they are kind of one giant empire. And so basically in the west you have basically the Polish people, and the Duchy of Prussia within the western part of Poland mainly had German people. And in the east part of Poland you have the Belarusian and the Ukrainian peasants that were ruled by Polish and Lithuanian lords. That's a lot of different types of people. Okay, so the main point is that you have different ethnic groups living together, and so there isn't this whole nationalist unity. The towns were dominated by Germans and Jews, and the King of Poland welcomed Jews seeking for religious freedom. Okay, so the Jews pretty much kept to themselves. They have their own little ethnic enclave, and there's no Polish middle class. Their main language is Latin, and they are Roman Catholic. What makes them unique as a nation is that the landed aristocracy, the landowners, held the most power in government. Okay, so they have an election process where they elect the monarch, and this made obviously the king very weak, and he did not have a centralized but decentralized state. And so the Polish aristocracy is called the Szlachta, and it was 8% of the population. And even though it doesn't seem that much, it's actually higher than the other estates, and they would dominate the Sejm. The J is silent. Okay, so the Sejm is the Polish Diet, their legislative assembly, and they elect the king, and usually they don't elect their own Polish people because they can't decide upon it, and they also don't agree with each other. And their goal right? As the aristocracy, they do not want to have a strong monarchy, and so we end up in 1652, where the Sejm comes up with the Librarian Veto. This meant that whenever the Diet meets together, the Assembly meets together, they need a unanimous vote to pass any types of laws or decisions. If it's not unanimous, right, one person, one member can blow it up. And this is where the exploding the Diet comes from in 1764. 48 out of 55 diets were exploded, meaning that they could not come to a consensus. And now the government in Poland is reduced to chaos. There's no law, no army, and no taxes for the king, and so that means there's no income. As far as the military, what ends up happening is that the military is in the hands of the private nobles, and they could basically conduct their own foreign affairs. They have their own foreign relations, which eventually gives them the power to be like mini monarchs, okay, local monarchs on their own estates, on their own manors. And the Poles, like I said, were too divided that they were influenced by a lot of foreign nations. They had, pro-French and pro-Swedish factions within Poland. And so Poland eventually becomes a power vacuum, meaning that with no central authority, right, which is going to bring it to its decline, all the other foreign powers are rushing in, and they are trying to, take hold of this opportunity in gaining territory, and Poland's going to be easy to invade, right, because they don't have a central government to protect them, but it's actually hard to rule because it's so vast and so differentiated in people, right? So by the 1660s, East Prussia became independent of Poland, and in 1667, the Muscovites reconquered Smolensk and Kiev, and so from this point, we see the Russians that are coming in, right? The Prussians are gaining more power. They're becoming independent. They're going to develop their military. We're going to get into that. And the talks begin. Okay, how are we going to actually divide up Poland, take over Poland? And if Poland actually had a centralized government and they weren't taken over by the Russians and by the Habsburgs, right, and the Hohenzollerns family, right, then there would still be a Poland, and the Prussian influence of Germany and Russia wouldn't be as great, but Poland fell apart. And so finally, the official partition of Poland will come in 1795, and here you have Poland, a map in its greatest extent.